Dr. Shay, it's great to have you on the show.
It's wonderful to be here.
Well, I'd love to start out by just getting a bit of your backstory
Yeah.
and tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. When talking about my story and kind of where I am now, I like to think about how um, my parallel roles throughout my career have kind of dovetailed into the work that I do right now, and um, how wonderful it is to be at a place where all of my passions are intersecting. So, to get a little bit of background, um, clinically, I am a licensed professional counselor, a financial therapist, and the story to get to that is, I don't know, I'll get into it. Um, but yeah, on the clinical side of things, again, my background is in marriage and family therapy. I've worked as a clinician for about 10 years. I have a private practice where I have seen over the past decade a variety of clients, ranging from, children, families, parents, individuals. But most recently in my work, I've done a lot of work with high achieving women of color. And in that work, um, I noticed a theme kind of starting to show up over the past few years with my clients coming in with concerns about um, stressing around money, um, financial shame, concerns with cross class growth or like upward mobility. And those types of things really, like, I started to notice again the theme. And so, as any good clinician does, I did some research and tried my best to find some resources to help my clients. And then I found the field of financial therapy, got certified as a financial therapist through the Financial Therapy Association. And in doing that certification process and learning more about financial therapy, I really fell in love with it. I was also on my own kind of personal finance journey, kind of learning my own money story and how that's impacting my behaviors with money. And so it was a really rewarding experience. And it's been really rewarding to continue to do that work and offer those services to my clients in my private practice. And then on the other side of things, I've also been a professor for the past 7 years. And so I've been teaching master's level students, master's level counselors in training how to be counselors. And I realized that the classes that I really, really loved teaching were the classes where I was really hands-on, teaching the students how to build solid therapeutic relationships with their clients, teaching the marriage and family therapy classes, of course, but also like helping students to say the right thing or like do the exploration and really be focused on kind of understanding their clients and where their clients are coming from. And so, how those two things have kind of dovetailed is in the work that I do now with consulting with for financial advisors. Um, I do kind of the supervising work that I used to do as a professor in conjunction with the financial therapy work to help advisors kind of implement um, internal finance concepts and pay attention to or kind of ask questions that are going to get more information around a client's values and beliefs and emotions and do all of that good work. So, long story long, that's who I am and how I got here.
All right, I appreciate that. So I want to hear a little bit about you growing up and what was money like when you were growing up. You mentioned you're sort of on your money story journey and trying to figure out your story.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit of that background. And then how does your history with money influence the way that you talk about money today with your clients?
Yes. The reason that the work with my clients really sparked or kind of existed at the same time with my own money stories because I started to see myself in my clients' money stories. My clients were sharing how, their parents didn't have a whole lot. And then they grew up and, got a solid job and stayed on that path. And now they're, making money that their parents have never seen before. That's the type of thing that I relate to. And so my personal money story is very much along those lines. I didn't grow up with a whole lot. Um, there were, of course, people who had far less than I had growing up. Um, but money was something that was always a concern. It was in the subtle things that, my mom would say or do that I noticed that, oh, okay, so maybe I shouldn't ask for this very expensive Christmas gift because we might not have the money to get that very expensive Christmas gift. So I became aware of money from a lack lens pretty early in life. And I think that has really solidified or kind of pushed me um, to get an education and to get a solid, stable job, which is kind of funny to me because I'm moving into entrepreneurship. So it's, things are ever evolving. But there was one thing that my dad told me before he passed, and he passed when I was 6. So this is something that really stood out to me and that I keep with me. And he told me that an education is something that can never be taken away from you. So get as much of it as you can and use it to the best that you can, because that's something that no one can ever take away from you. People can, steal tangible possessions, but an education, the things that you know and what you're able to do with that education, you're not gonna, like, people can't take that from you. And so I took that advice, that knowledge, and it guided me throughout, my bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, all of that. And I think that advice is still kind of the through line in the work that I'm doing now as I laugh about moving into entrepreneurship. It's still there because the knowledge that I have and what I'm doing with that knowledge is creating a sense of stability for me. And it's how I'm helping the world, I guess.
And do you have a preference in terms of working with financial advisors to sort of train and educate them in this area of interior finance, or do you prefer to work with the clients of financial advisors, or does it just not really make any difference to you? It's all pretty much the same thing that you're teaching and training.
I think mostly I like the work with the advisors, just like I like the academic work with other counselors. Of course, I have my own clients and, I help people every day unpack and untangle all of their emotions related to money. But I really find a whole lot of reward in having conversations with other professionals that are doing the work. And like, this may sound very selfish, but it feels like my reach is expanded when I can help someone help other people. It's an exponential kind of arm of help that I can reach and extend.
So this idea of interior finance or life planning, maybe we should just level set here and just sort of
Yeah.
get a good definition. When you say interior finance, how are you defining that as it relates to the work that a financial advisor does?
Yeah. So to me, interior finance is the intersection of how values, beliefs, and emotions impact our money behaviors. And so for advisors and conversations that I've had, a lot of times that interior finance piece shows up when there's a challenge that the advisor is having in the implementation of a plan with a client. And their, advisors will say, I've told the client, or we've set these goals, and the client has shared their values of wanting to spend more time with family, or we've done all of this, and the client has the knowledge of what they need to do in order to, achieve these goals. But there's something happening. There's something getting in the way between what they know they should do and what they actually do. And in those conversations, it becomes quite clear to me that, what exists in the middle of that, of the knowledge and behaviors, is the emotional stuff, the interior finance stuff. Not only what the values are or what the beliefs are, but how are those things interacting and, impacting a client's emotional experience, which is then impacting their financial behaviors. And so being able to have conversations around that and get a little bit of clarity around, what's exactly happening for a client internally that might be showing up externally. That's the work that I do with interior finance and how it relates to advisors.
So what you're talking about there really is this idea of the knowing doing gap. So it's like,
Yeah.
hey, I know what I should be doing, but I'm not actually doing it. And so it's
Right.
this messy middle piece here that you're talking about that
Yeah.
gets really sticky and gooey.
Mhm.
And that's, we talk about sort of, some people might think, well, that's the soft stuff, but really
Yeah.
it's the hard stuff. That's the difficult stuff. That's where
Yeah.
things get real. And there are definitely advisors out there who want to go there, who go through the
Mhm.
training and they really want to
Mhm.
have those kinds of conversations. And when it's done well, the impact of that can just be incredible. So what kind of feedback or perhaps resistance or embracing do you see with advisors when you want to have those kinds of conversations? Or do you see some resistance from advisors that when things are getting really emotional and people are starting to cry, do you see that advisors sort of live for those conversations, or do they just sort of like, whoa, this is getting too deep. I need to get Dr. Shay involved here because I can't go here.
Yeah, so it's a mix, right? There are some advisors who are very um like spreadsheet advisors. They're very big numbers people. That's why they got into the field. That's what they do, and that's, how they view the profession and the work that they do. And then we have the more curious, the more emotionally soft skills curious advisors who are more open to and willing to kind of engage in learning more about it. Personally, I have more experience with the latter. And I think people who come across me or want to have a conversation with me are already curious about the soft stuff, the soft skills and how to integrate that. Um, in some of the conversations, I think I notice three kind of main things that come up in conversations with advisors. And there's like these three pieces of like first, not knowing what you don't know as it relates to emotions and the soft skills. Um, and then there's the not knowing how to find out, like not knowing how to gain information around um, those values and emotions and beliefs, and like how to ask the right questions with clients. And then there's also not knowing what to do with that stuff. So to your point of, there are plenty of times where I have a conversation with an advisor and they're like, I don't know if I'm an advisor or a therapist right now. I have so many feelings that come up in my conversations with clients, and I don't know, should I just send them your way, or should I just, is there anything that I can do to help, navigate these things? And, it's really interesting to kind of hear that because as a therapist, I hear that from a lot of different professionals. I feel like a therapist sometimes. I mean, my husband is in the airline industry and he's in management, and he often comes home and it's like, I'm not sure if I was a therapist today or a manager. But
The answer is both.
so exactly,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always both, right?
Yep.
And so when I have conversations with advisors, the biggest piece is like having that awareness around what that looks like and what that feels like for you in the moment when a client is sharing their emotions and what your inclination is. So if your inclination is to completely shut it off when the emotions show up, that's going to show your clients that emotions aren't welcome here. And all money conversations are emotional conversations. And so that could be for some clients. Some clients may be more like the spreadsheet advisors who want to just talk about the numbers and that's it. But other clients, if the emotions are left out of the conversation, then it can be off-putting or invalidating. So I don't want to get too off on a tangent.
Yeah. And what have you found with advisors in terms of, does this interior finance conversation, does it just come up in the normal course of the conversation? Or are advisors who are serious about this, are they integrating it into their actual process when they're meeting with new clients?
Yeah.
Is it something where they're having this conversation at the front end of the beginning of the relationship, and then they're going to talk about the financial plan and the investing piece? Or is it, hey, we're going to start with the financial planning and the investment piece and what really brought you here today, and then sort of work in the interior finance stuff? stuff comes up or stuff starts getting in the way? How do you see advisors integrating this into their process of working with new clients?
Yeah, all of the above, everything that you said. It can be a piece. Well, to me, I look at it as a foundational kind of outlook or a worldview or a lens through which an advisor views the work that they do. Now, as I mentioned, there might be some advisors who have a different lens, have a more, this is the spreadsheet, this is the number, these are the numbers, this is the plan, this is what we're doing. Emotions, get them out of here. And that's fine. But then if you are kind of thinking about integrating more of these interior kind of concepts, it's a paradigm shift. It's gonna show up kind of in all of the work that you do and all of the questions that you ask and all of the ways that you talk about a client's money life and their money plan and their aspirations and their goals and everything. It's going to come with um, questions or curiosity around, and how is that showing up for you emotionally? Or what are some of your beliefs and values around these goals? And so I guess to your point or to your question, it does show up in multiple ways. There can be some specific questions that you ask or you integrate into your onboarding process as an advisor that are going to give you, allow the client to share their story in a way that is inclusive of their upbringing and who they are as a person and their values and what they learned from their parents or their family of origin, what they learned, what their relationship to money even looks like. And I like to ask that question or to ask like I like to ask that question in my own financial therapy work with clients. What's your relationship to money? Because it kind of externalizes money as an entity, like as a thing. And it gives me it gives me insight into what the emotional space of a client of a client is in regards to money. So asking questions like that at the outset can be really helpful, but then throughout the relationship, throughout the advisory relationship, professionals can kind of sprinkle those types of questions or just have an overarching sense of curiosity around values, beliefs, emotions, and how they're showing up, how they're contributing to what's going on in the current, in the current state of the plan or, in the process.
So by definition, interior finance, starts with the word interior, which
Mhm.
obviously means it's on the inside, as
Mhm.
opposed to something that is on the outside and something that is separate. So what I think I'm hearing you say is sort of this lens that you're viewing it through. It's like interior finance is not a separate thing, like I apply it at the beginning of the process or in the middle or the end of the process. It's just something that it's there. It permeates. It's not a separate thing that I can flip on or flip off
Right.
whenever I need to. It just becomes part of my relationship with my clients, part of their
Mhm.
relationship with money, my relationship with money, all the baggage and biases that I have around money that I
Right.
bring to my client that I have to watch out for. So it's there. It's not this separate thing. Is that a fair way to describe how you think of it too? Or
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that's fully integrated into the work. It's not a checkbox thing or just something that's supplemental. It's a fully integrated piece or a fully integrated way of looking at your clients and building relationships in an intentional way to keep those things in mind.
yeah, I just had a conversation earlier this morning with Heather Robertson, who is the CEO of Signature FD. And it's very clear that her firm is very focused on this exact topic. And
Right.
they call it net worthwhile. And they talk about activating your dreams. And
Mhm.
so they're very focused on this idea of interior finance, although that's not the specific words that she used.
Mhm.
But she also said something very interesting, which is she said, this is really who we are. And this is how we
Yeah.
present ourselves to the public. And we are going to attract other people who want to have that kind of
Mhm.
relationship with their advisor. And we're not going to attract the people who just want the numbers, who say, hey, just give me a financial plan. Just tell me if I've got enough money to retire. And
Right.
so, and I said to her, I said, that takes a lot of courage to sort
Mhm.
of put that stake in the ground in terms of this is who we are, and we want to work with the kind of people that appreciate and value this. And I think that's certainly where the industry is heading. as a
Mhm.
result of artificial intelligence. And over time, that's going to be able to do more and more of the mechanical part or the financial part of being an advisor. And so I think this whole thing we're talking about here today is certainly a crucial topic that is only going to get more and more important as time goes on.
Yes, absolutely. And to what you were saying about that firm, it may be a bold move or a bold step to kind of niche down and say these are the people that we serve, and there are people that we may not be a good match for. But that is also, in addition to being, brave, it's also really like um self-preserving, or it really helps an advisor to do the thing that they do well, really well, and not try to meet everyone's need, not try to be jack of all trades, master of none. Um, so yeah, I think that's really admirable and really wonderful that they're doing that.
So you and I are certainly on the same page here with all this,
Mhm.
but what happens for advisors out there that are like, nah, that's not why I got into this business. I just like to have conversations with people. I like to do financial planning. What risk are they running if they're not willing to go deeper and engage in these types of conversations?
Yeah, they run the risk of mismatch with their clients and their style. Um, so they run the risk of like getting a client and working with a client that may need that or may want that. And if they're unable to provide it, or unwilling or unable to provide that kind of holistic service, then their clients may feel a bit distanced from them, maybe invalidated in their experience. They may feel that the relationship is cold. And, it sounds very negative, and I don't want to like offend any of the listeners who are spreadsheet people or numbers people, because that's your prerogative. Um, but in thinking about the relationship, it can be antithetical to building a solid relationship and fully understanding a person. I like to say that, like, clients, advising clients, therapy clients, people, everybody actually, we all view the world through our own set of lenses. And our own experiences, our values, our beliefs, our emotions shade or like tint the lenses through which we view the world. And so everybody's lenses, everybody's glasses are their own perfectly unique shade, different color, different tint, or whatever. But if I'm trying to build a relationship with someone, and I'm trying to build an empathic relationship with them, and I'm trying to provide a service to them, I need to at least have an idea of what that tint is, what that shade looks like, what makes them go, what makes them, and what's happened in the past that is causing them to see the world the way that they see it. And so I guess another risk that advisors who may not integrate these types of concepts into their work, a risk that they run, is not fully seeing their clients for who they are, and thus creating a plan that might not be in alignment with how your client views the world, which again kind of leads us back to um, implementation barriers.
Yeah, and what you just said there is so critical, and it's something that I, at my advanced age, continue to work on. I mean, because
Yeah.
we all have those situations, and advisors have these all the time where they have a client and we've got a plan, it makes sense, yet for whatever reason, the client's not following through,
Mhm.
or the client wants to sell as soon as the market drops 10% or 20%. It's like, it seems irrational to us, but to your point, it's like, well, what's the lens through which they're viewing this? What's the
Mhm.
experiences that they have that we may not be aware of that is
Right.
causing them to react the way that they are? It's that tint, it's that shade that you're talking about there.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, life would be so much better if we could all just have a deeper appreciation for the fact that each of us come from different experiences, different backgrounds, different ways of viewing things and interpreting things. And I always like to say, two reasonable people can look at the exact same thing and have diametrically opposed conclusions to
Yeah.
that thing. But it's
Yeah.
all because of how our experiences has shaped our beliefs. And
Yeah.
I think, and that's something that I sort of continue to really work on, is really trying to understand and appreciate that my experience is an N of one. No one
Mhm.
else in this world has had the same experience that I've had, not even my
Right.
siblings.
Right.
And it's true for everybody else, right? And
Yeah.
so if we have a little bit more of that empathy and understanding, and a little bit more of the interior finance work, as your expertise here, helps deliver, it's like I think we can all have a better understanding of each other, of our clients, and not get as frustrated with them when a client isn't really doing what they say they want to do, what they know they should be doing, but they're just not doing. So if we have a little more appreciation and empathy, I think, uh, and the expertise that you sort of bring to the table here, that we can get some more progress made.
Yes, absolutely. And as you were saying that, it reminded me of how, like, in our relationships overall, um, having a better understanding, or at least a little bit more empathy, and extending some more grace to one another, can help us to really see things through one another's lens, put our, take a mile in other people's shoes. And that shows up in our family relationships as well, and like in couples who are trying to navigate their own financial emotions within themselves, but then also maybe being activated by how their partner is viewing something, or um, you know each person trying to see what's going on through the other person's lens, or seeing the same thing from different perspectives, like you said.
Yeah, and I'm also glad to hear you mentioned a couple or partners here. Let's
Mhm.
talk about the family dynamics as it
Yeah.
relates to interior finance. And I know this is also sometimes a frustration for advisors, where, say, they have a couple, but there's only one person in the couple that's really taking the lead, or only one person in the couple is actually showing up for the meetings. And then, of course, we've got children, and perhaps they become the beneficiary. So, how do you think about the family dynamics as it relates to the interior finance conversation? What should advisors do around that?
Yeah, family dynamics is so important to consider when thinking about all of this interior finance stuff, because so much of our values and beliefs and emotions around money, and our behaviors even around money, can be learned from our families of origin, our parents, our caregivers, grandparents, the people that we spent the most time with as a child in our formative years, right? A lot of times people think, oh, childhood is about growing up and developing in every way except financially. People seldom think about our financial socialization in childhood, um, and how the family can play a huge role in it. But in the, coming from my perspective now, the work that we do, or the work that I do as a financial therapist, so much of the conversations that I have with my clients tie back to experiences that they've had, things that they've learned from their families of origin, from their parents, and things like that. So that's a big piece. It's just kind of understanding that interior finance stuff, all of the things that are going on individually or internally for a person, are heavily impacted by their family system, their family of origin. Now, how that can show up in the advisory relationship um, is plenty of ways, probably more ways than we could possibly talk about today. But in thinking about, let's say, couples, because I know that advisors, a lot of their work is with couples. Um, Something that can show up is the idea that people they often get into relationships with other people because they share values, and they may share beliefs, or um, they have things that connect them on a really deep level, for the most part, I hope. um, And so there can also be, like we were just talking about, different understandings of those values, or different shades of those values. So the values between, a married couple might be the same, but the way that they're looking at that value might be different. One person, the couple may value spending time with family, or, setting kids up for success, And one person may see that as I have to work really hard so I can set my kids up for success and we can spend time whenever, where the other person may see things as like, oh no, you can, we don't have to work too much. You're working too much. You're not spending enough time with the family, and that's going to impact us in a significant way. And so it's important for advisors to be cognizant of not only what the value is, but what's underlying the value and how each person is understanding or makes meaning of the values that show up, because that's going to help in the goal setting process. Um, and that can be difficult when there are multiple people in the room or when there are multiple people having a conversation. It can be difficult to kind of navigate those conversations in a way where each person feels heard and you're able to do some exploration with each person. But to mitigate that, or I guess to help with that, um, advisors can be very intentional about giving space to each person and asking questions to each person, not just questions to one person, or kind of balancing the conversation in that way.
There's a very interesting case study that is unfolding as you and I are having our conversation here
Yeah.
today, and it's with the family of Rupert Murdoch,
Oh.
who is the patriarch of the family that owns the Wall Street Journal,
Mhm.
Barron's, a bunch of different newspapers, Fox News, and so Rupert is generally pretty conservative from a political standpoint,
Mm.
and he's 93 years old, worth many billions of dollars. And back in, I'm going to say maybe 2006 or 2008, he created an irrevocable trust, which was designed to continue his business holdings long after he passes away. And my understanding is he's got more than four kids, but four kids in particular were each given equal voting shares in the company to determine sort of the main direction of the business. Well, long story short, it turns out of the four, one of them has the same worldview, political leanings as the dad does. And so dad makes him, Lachlan, the CEO of the company, thinking he's going to continue with sort of the conservative perspective that the dad wants. The other three kids are not that persuasion. And so now there's a big fight between, well, what the dad wanted to do was he wanted to change the trust so that Lachlan would have basically the full voting rights for any decisions about the business, so that it could continue with their particular political leanings and worldview. Now there's this huge fight because the three kids are like, no, we're not going to give up our 25% voting share. And so the three kids are against their other sibling. The three kids are against their dad. And of course, it's this huge, big fight. It's all about money. It's all about power. So as a financial therapist, I know most advisors are not going to come into a situation quite like this at this large scale, of course. And all these kids are billionaires. They've already gotten a bunch of money. So they're all billionaires. So it's not like they really need more money per se. But how do you think about that sort of writ large,
Yep.
with all the emotions that are tied up into this, the worldviews that are tied up with this, the sibling dynamics, the parental kid dynamics? How do you think about that whole cauldron of emotions there?
Yes. To me, again, given my background as a marriage and family therapist, I immediately see things initially through the lens of family systems theory. And to me, everything that you just explained is the manifestation of rigid familial boundaries, or rigidity overall in a family system. So just a little bit of background. I'm trying not to get off on a tangent and nerd out
Go
too
on a
much.
tangent. I'm all for tangents here.
So, family systems theory is kind of a way of looking at families through the perspective that they exist like other systems. Think about, like um, a bicycle or a car or something like that, right? The idea is that families, like other systems, are made up of individual pieces, individual parts that work together within a set of rules, roles, boundaries, etc., to achieve a certain goal or to, maintain a level of homeostasis, right? So with a bike, you got the pedals, you got the chain, you got the I want to say the steering wheel. No, the handlebars. The handlebars. You have each of the pieces that work together to achieve the goal of a person getting on and riding it to wherever they want to go. Family systems are very similar. You got each individual, well, they're very similar and different, and I'll get to that. But you got each individual person within a family system that within a set of rules, roles, expectations, and boundaries, operate with the other people in the system. They influence and are influenced by the other people in the system. And the things that they do, the behaviors that happen, the dynamics that occur, maintain a level of homeostasis and meet a certain goal that the family has. Now, when we have issues within family systems or where we run into conflict or challenges within a family system is when plenty of things can occur. There's maybe a lack of clarity around what the rules and roles and expectations are. So you've got pieces that don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. And so they just kind of go haywire. I can imagine if a pedal didn't know what it was supposed to be doing, or if it didn't operate properly on a bike, it'd be hard to push the pedal and make it do what it's supposed to do. So if people within a family system aren't aware of what their roles are, or what the boundaries that exist within the family system are, then that's going to cause trouble for the system overall in maintaining that goal or maintaining that homeostasis. Now, another piece that is showing up in the story that you just described is boundaries and rigidity and fluidity in boundaries. Most families who, are quote unquote healthy, whatever that means, because it means something different for each family system.
We're all
But
dysfunctional in our own way.
exactly. So most quote unquote healthy families have, again, clear boundaries, but they're also a nice balance between rigid and flexible, or they're a balance between rigid and diffuse, which is flexible. Flexible falls in the middle of that. And that means that people are aware of what the boundaries are, but there's also a level of understanding around when the boundaries can change or when the rules can change in a system. Throughout the course of a family's lifespan, um, children grow up. Each individual within a system is going to change in age and have differences of opinions or things like that. And so sometimes within that family system, boundaries and rules and roles that may have worked, in the past, 10 years ago, aren't going to work in the current, 10 years later when, a child that was 5 is now 15. I'm sure parents listening would agree with that. You can't parent a 5-year-old child, the same way that you parent a 15-year-old child. And so in this situation that you mentioned, it seems like the patriarch is expecting the system to operate in a very rigid way. He's expecting to um, kind of have a large level of control over the other pieces in the system. And that's not going to fly with the rest of the people, in the system. And so, as you mentioned, there's going to be some subgroups, like the 3 children who have different views. And there's going to be some infighting around, who gets control, and it's going to cause conflict and all of these emotional things. And I'm sure, I don't know these people personally, of course, but I'm sure there are so many experiences that each of those children have had throughout the course of their lives that are also going to show up in how this battle, I guess, goes down, and this fight for, like you said, power and control, or even, I don't know, maybe a level of fairness, or like the adjustments to what that succession is going to look like in this family. So lots of things.
Yes. So let's take the Murdoch family saga, which is, we're talking about billions here, and let's sort of bring it down
Mhm.
to a level that an advisor might typically work on sort of same, let's say, similar family dynamics where there's a big struggle related to money, there's emotion, there's power, there's sibling rivalries, there's sort of the same drama that's happening at the Murdoch family level, but at a scale of which an advisor might work in. So if we think about that, how do you envision the role of the financial advisor to mediate's probably not the right word, but what's sort of the role of the advisor in that saga versus someone like you who has the expertise in financial therapy, family and marriage counseling? So where do the sort of the lines blur and the roles need to change where the advisor says, hey, I'm out of my league here. I need to bring in Dr. Shay to help this, or how do you view that?
Yeah. So in a, I guess, smaller scale situation where an advisor is having some issues kind of navigating family dynamics, there are some things that financial advisors can do. Um, one of those biggest thing, or one of the biggest things, is understanding what the pattern is that's existing within the family, and interrupting that. Um, Another thing is like clarifying the roles, like
No, no.
who is,
What do you mean when you say interrupting that? What do you mean by
yes.
interrupting the pattern?
Yeah. So let's say, let's say every time you meet with a family, let's say mom, dad, and kid, just keep it a little simple. um, every time you meet with this family, you notice that when you get to the topic of, mm, I don't know, retirement planning, I guess. When you get to a topic, a specific topic, one person starts to get distant or upset. Another person may rush in to try and save that person from their feelings. Then the other person may get frustrated and walk out of the room. Those things, that type of pattern might happen in the room. And that's something that you can interrupt if you notice it early enough. So if you are starting to have a conversation about whatever it is that kind of sets this ball in motion, you can interrupt the way things usually happen by maybe prefacing the conversation with, okay, we're about to talk about X, Y, and Z. I know this tends to be a really emotional conversation for us. So, what can we do differently this time to make sure that the conversation ends on a different note, or things like that? I guess that's what I mean by interrupting the pattern.
Okay, yeah, no, and that's a great tool right there.
Mhm.
Sort of this prefacing conversation. If
Yeah.
trigger warning, I know this is gonna, everyone gets a little emotional when we talk about this next topic. So yeah, so I like how you preface that. That's a good tool there.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other thing is just kind of having a level of clarity around who, like what the roles are in the family, because you don't want to kind of make assumptions about what's okay and what's not okay in the family system. So having a level of clarity around, who speaks for the family, if that is, something that exists, who has final say over decisions that are made in the family and things like that. Now, when it gets to a point where an advisor may want to, reach out to or refer out to someone like me, um, would be maybe when the conflict gets a little bit too much, or when the advisory process is being impeded by these emotional things, these relational things. As a parent, I can't even fathom, leaving my child something in my will because I just hate their guts. Or, there's been so much damage that's been done in our relationship that, I want to be able to leave them something, but I just can't right now. That might be a place where someone like myself could step in and do some relationship repair. And just do some exploration around what that looks like for the family, and rebuilding those relationships to best include everyone in the financial planning process.
So if a financial advisor is listening to this and they say, I really want to do a better job having these deep type conversations with my clients, I want to have some better tools
Mm-hmm.
to help me when situations arise, as we've been discussing here today. what advice would you have in terms of how can they get better trained in this area?
Yeah. Well, I would personally recommend the Financial Therapy Association. Um, but also there are so many scholars that are doing great work. Maybe I would recommend starting with The Psychology of Money. I have it right here. I can't remember. Oh, Morgan Housel is the author. And then there's also the Klontz brothers' work and the and Collar's work. There are podcasts that exist that just kind of give a basic kind of foundational understanding or connection to uh, what that looks like in the advisory process and like how you can integrate some of these concepts into your work with clients. Speaking of a podcast, I mean, I don't know if this is a space to shamelessly plug, but
Absolutely.
I have a podcast of my own, Shades of Wealth, kind of going back to our conversation around, how everyone sees things through their own shaded glasses. Um, and so in that podcast, I have conversations with people around some of these interior finance concepts. And I get people's money stories and I talk to professionals in the field to give some tips and tricks on how to navigate some of these challenges that people have with money. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned your podcast. I'd love off the top of your head if there's a particular episode that you think would be
Mm.
really helpful or something that came up in one of the episodes that you think would be really helpful for you and I to chat about here on our podcast.
Sure. Well, it's brand spanking new. So we've got one episode out so far. I've got a few in the chamber, I guess. But in that episode, I think it's really cool how the person that I interviewed about their money story, um, he shared a financial flashpoint, which is something we didn't really talk about, but I think it's really important. And financial flashpoints are those events that happen throughout the course of your life that really solidify or kind of um, work to build your foundation of your relationship to money. They deeply affect you in a specific way. And in this financial flashpoint, the person who shared was talking about how he witnessed his parents fighting about money after his dad bought a new four-wheeler, I think. And so he's outside riding on the four-wheeler and he looks in and sees them fighting in the window about, you know, the dad buying the four-wheeler. And so for that person, it really like he internalized, oh no, money, like buying things or me enjoying money or me enjoying things that have been bought causes strife, it causes issues, it causes pain, it causes hurt and arguing and conflict. And so that led to that person becoming very money avoidant in their behaviors moving forward throughout his life. And so it's like things like that. And, each person in each interview that I've done and will continue to do, there are those significant pieces, the significant things that happen in life that an advisor wouldn't really know anything about. They wouldn't know, about that story unless the client told them or unless they asked specific questions about, what was it like? What did you learn from your parents about money? What was your earliest memory of money? Things like that.
One of the things that's coming up for me as we're having our conversation here today is the importance of awareness. And what I mean by that is, and I've tried to do this myself over the years as well, which is simply when I'm in conversation with someone, I'm trying to really pay as close attention to them as I possibly can. And sometimes they'll say something and it may not register with me. But then a day later, a week later, a month later, I reflect back and I think, oh, they said that. And I should have picked up on that because that really meant this. And that's why they did this or that or whatever the case may be. But a lot of times clients will give you subtle cues or whoever you're in conversation with, there's a subtle cue that if you're alert for it and you can pick up on it, it's going to lead to a much richer conversation. I think it's the same thing as a podcast host. So you've got a podcast, I've got a podcast. It's like I'm trying to pay as close attention as I possibly can so that I can pick up any little thing that you might say, a particular word that maybe you use 2 or 3 times. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, that must be important because now they've said the same word 3 times in the
Mhm.
last 30 minutes. So maybe I need to explore that a little bit further. But I think just being aware of the subtle cues that people give off, I think can help us have deeper and richer conversations.
Absolutely. And in my work as a professor, I teach my students, I call it developing your counselor ear.
Mm,
And putting your counselor ear on before you go into session with the client. The same is true in the advisory relationship. If you are, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about kind of this being an integrated thing, if you're going into your work with your clients with the perception of, or looking through the lens of, I want to know more about who this person is, in addition to the assets and the numbers and all of the things and what they want to do, but I'm curious about who they are and where they come from and what they value and what makes them tick. Having that lens is going to help you to put on that, I guess, interior finance advisor ear. I don't know.
there you
Let's
go.
trademark that.
You just coined a new phrase here.
But putting that ear on to be able to hear those subtle things, the value statements that you might have missed if you were maybe focused on something else. Yeah.
And what's interesting there too is each of us, I think, have our own way of how we try to be aware and have that counselor's ear
Mm,
on and being aware. Because I remember I recorded a podcast with a guest who is an expert in listening,
mm,
and we were going to record over Zoom, and she made it very clear that she did not want the video on
mm,
because she felt for a number of reasons that the video was going to be distracting and we're going to we want to sort of look at the screen so we can see the person, but really the other person doesn't see us looking at them in the eyes because, the
right.
camera's at a different angle and there's a little bit of a lag time between my lips moving and you actually hearing the sound because there's some latency here over the internet, so on and so forth. She said she doesn't have her phone
Mm,
in anywhere in sight. She doesn't even want to have cognition that there's a phone, like over here. And so I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of what she has to do to be super focused in the conversation that she's in. Now, you and I, we have our videos on here, and we're seeing each other. And I've tried the other way, but I think I prefer to be able to see the person and sort of get some of the verbal cues. Now, one mistake I made, and this was pointed out here recently when I had a three-way Zoom, is that when I was speaking, I was looking at the camera because I want the person who's seeing me to make it look like I'm looking directly into their eyes.
mhm.
Well, what that meant was I was not picking up the verbal cues from the
Right.
person I was speaking to. And
Yeah.
the third person, who is a colleague of mine, said, I think you were starting to lose them.
Mm,
And I didn't pick up on that because I was looking at the camera, not looking at them and picking up the verbal cues that I was probably putting them to sleep. So anyway, it's like, there's still all kinds of things that we can learn over time. And it's
yeah.
just, I find it fun to try and figure out all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, reducing distractions to be able to listen and hear is very important. But communication, at least from my understanding and from my perspective, communication is so much more than that. So much more than just the words that are being said or even the tone with which the words are being said. There's so much in the facial expressions, so much in, the body language. And as a clinician, I'm all about trying to figure out like what's going on here, especially in working with couples and families.
Mhm.
There's always somebody rolling their eyes when another person
Yeah.
is talking.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
being
And that,
able to, yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, being able to pick up on that, that's also a part of communication. And it also helps, like you were saying earlier, to pick up on the things that you might not have noticed in the moment, or those things that a few days later are like, oh yeah, maybe that's something that I could have, followed up on.
Yeah, and that's one reason why I like, well, I don't know if I say I like to, but I listen to my podcasts
Mm,
afterwards and I think, man, why didn't I follow up with this question when the guest said this, or why didn't I pick up that they said this word three times and I didn't sort of follow through on that thread that they
yeah.
were laying out for me. So
Yeah.
it takes a real skill
Mm,
and both sort of an art and a science. So we talk about reading the facial expressions. I think it was
right.
Paul Ekman who is sort of a recognized expert in that area
Mm,
of reading facial expressions. And so, there's been a lot of research, as you're well aware, in that whole area too. So it's a never ending quest to get better at what you do.
yes, absolutely. And
All
it's so
right.
much fun though.
Oh, it is. Yeah. That's why I'm up to about 800 podcast episodes now, because I just love talking to people like you that
Mm.
are experts at what you do. And I get to learn so much. So it's a lot of fun for me. So, well, Dr. Shays, we get ready to wrap up here. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention that perhaps we haven't touched on, or maybe something you want to reiterate and emphasize a little bit more that we may have touched on?
Um, I don't think so. I think we hit all the points. I think this was an amazing conversation. It was really great to kind of share a little bit about some things that I'm passionate about.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. So if folks want to connect with you or hire you or learn more about what you're doing and listen to the podcast, what's the best way for them to stay in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach out or they can check my website out at harrispierreconsulting.com. That is Harris, like the last name, Pierre, like the French Peter, and consulting.com. There's information about all the services that I provide at that website. There's also a page dedicated to the podcast there. And my podcast also has its own website, which is shadesofwealthpod.com.
Perfect. All right. Dr. Shay, again, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.